I was already standing in line at the clinic, holding ticket number 37 in my hand, when I realized that the doctor who was supposed to terminate my pregnancy was the same man I had spent that night with 3 months ago. He was looking at me through the glass partition of the reception window, and in his eyes there was no judgment, no surprise, only a calmness, as if he had been waiting for this encounter all along. But back then, on that October night outside the Imperial Club, I had no idea that this half-conscious man in a dirty shirt would become the father of my child. I only knew one thing. My husband, Mark, was kissing a 20-year-old girl right at the company party of our beauty salon. He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't even embarrassed that half of our employees saw him. 8 years of marriage fell apart in an instant. 8 years of building a business together, sharing a bed, planning for children who never seemed to come. Mark would always say, "There's time, Emily, don't rush." But all the while, he was rushing into the arms of a young trainee makeup artist. I ran out of the club without even grabbing my coat, and the December air hit my face like a slap. Near the service entrance lay a man. He wasn't old, maybe 35, rumpled, drunk, with a split lip. The security guards were standing over him, arguing about what to do. "He's got his ID, he's alive, let him sleep it off," one said. "Just toss him out of the gates, no need to fuss," another replied. I still don't understand what came over me. Maybe in his face, I saw the same pain I was feeling. Maybe I just wanted to do something reckless, to hurt Mark the way he had hurt me. "He's a friend of mine," I told the guards. "I'll take him." The man could barely stand, but when I took his arm, he looked at me with surprisingly clear eyes. "Thank you," he croaked. "But I'm not." "Don't talk," I said. "Just come with me." We caught a cab. He gave the driver an address on a quiet street on Vasilevsky Island, lined with old houses. In the car, he didn't say a word, just leaned against the window, while I kept thinking that what I was doing was beyond repair. But the thought that Mark might be looking for me in the club pushed me on. His apartment was surprisingly clean for a bachelor. Medical books, a tidy kitchen, fresh linens on the bed. He apologized and went to take a shower, while I stood in the middle of that unfamiliar living room, not understanding why I was even there. When he came out, clean, in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair still damp, I saw a completely different person, tired but handsome. "My name is David," he said. "I don't understand why you helped me." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked over to him and kissed him. He didn't resist, but he didn't take the lead either. He just let me do what I needed. We made love slowly, gently, as if we both understood that this wasn't about finding happiness. It was about forgetting pain. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. David was in the kitchen, already dressed, reading something on his phone. 2 cups were on the table, along with a plate of sandwiches. "Good morning," he said without looking up. "I don't even know your name." A wave of shame washed over me. What had I done? Cheated on my husband with a stranger because I caught him with someone else? It was absurd, like something out of a teenage drama. "Emily," I said, grabbing my things, "I need to go." "Wait," he tried to stop me. "Maybe you could tell me what happened. Last night you looked—" "Nothing happened," I said quickly as I pulled on my shoes. "I'm sorry. This was a mistake." I ran out of the apartment before he could say another word. Mark was waiting at home, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, as if nothing had happened. He even smiled when I walked in. "There's my runaway," he said. "Got scared of the party? You should have let me know. I would have walked you home." I stood in the doorway looking at the man I had lived with for 8 years. How can he speak to me so calmly, I thought, when just hours ago he was kissing someone else? "Mark," I started. "By the way," he interrupted, I was thinking, maybe it's time we really tried for kids. You've always wanted that. The salon is doing well, we can afford it. He spoke so naturally that for a moment I doubted myself. Had I really seen what I thought I saw? Maybe it was nothing, just a friendly moment I misunderstood. "What do you think?" he asked, coming closer. "Emily, you're acting strange. Are you okay?" He hugged me, and I smelled his familiar cologne, mixed with that same sweet scent that wasn't mine. "Where were you last night?" I asked. "Looking for you," he answered without blinking. "Then I came home, thinking you'd already be here." "And you?" A lie. The boldest, most cynical lie. And he didn't even try to make it sound believable. The next 3 weeks passed like a strange game. Mark played the part of the perfect husband, bringing me flowers, suggesting romantic dinners, talking about our future. And I pretended to believe him, tried to forget that night with David. But I couldn't. Not because I had fallen for that stranger. No, it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But now, between me and Mark, there was a secret that grew heavier with every passing day. I tried to get back to normal life. I worked at the salon, met with friends, went to the movies with Mark. But inside, there was a constant anxiety, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that sooner or later, I would fall. And I did fall. On the morning I woke up nauseous and realized I was late. 10 days late. I bought a pregnancy test at a pharmacy on the other side of the city, as if someone might see me and tell Mark. The 2 pink lines appeared instantly, clear and undeniable. I sat in the bathroom on the closed toilet, staring at them. Pregnant. But by whom? Mark and I had been together that same week I was with David. Mathematically, either of them could be the father. But by the dates, it was more likely the stranger from that night. I hid the test in my makeup bag and went out to the kitchen, where Mark was eating breakfast, reading the news on his phone. "How's it going, sunshine?" he asked, not looking up. "Fine," I replied. And that was my first lie in this new life that had already begun. For 2 weeks, I carried this secret inside me like a bomb with a ticking timer. Every morning I woke up thinking, today I'll tell Mark. Every night I went to bed without saying anything. I tried to convince myself the baby was his, counting the days, reading endless articles about conception, looking for any shred of proof to make myself feel better. Maybe if Mark stopped his games and we truly became a family, I could forget that night. Maybe I could pretend it never happened. But Mark didn't stop. He just got better at hiding it. Staying late at work, taking calls in the other room, turning his phone face down when we ate dinner. I saw all those little signs and I knew nothing had changed. He had just become more careful, while the nausea grew worse. In the mornings, I could barely make it to the bathroom, and Mark would ask if I had caught a cold. I'd nod and run to throw up, thinking how absurd everything had become. That Wednesday night, I couldn't take it anymore. Mark was watching football on TV, and I was pretending to work on salon reports on my laptop. In reality, I was reading pregnancy forums, trying to figure out when to do a DNA test. His phone lay on the couch between us, buzzing with messages for half an hour. He ignored it, too engrossed in the game. The notifications lit up the screen, and I couldn't help but see the first lines. "Mark, I miss you. When will I see you again? I can't take this anymore. You promised you'd talk to your wife." You promised to talk to your wife. That meant it wasn't just a fling. He was planning to leave me for that 20-year-old girl who worked at our salon. I stood up and went to the bedroom. My hands were shaking as I opened the drawer where I kept my documents. I had to find the number of a gynecological clinic to schedule an abortion immediately, because if Mark was leaving, I wouldn't be able to handle this alone, not with a child whose paternity was in question, not at 28, starting over from scratch. I dialed the clinic's number with trembling fingers. "City Gynecological Hospital," a flat female voice answered. "I need to make an appointment," I said. There was a pause. "For an abortion?" she clarified. "How far along?" "About 6 weeks," I said. "We can offer you tomorrow at 9 a.m. or the day after at 11. "Tomorrow!" I blurted out before I could change my mind. 9 o'clock. When I came back to the living room, Mark was still watching TV. His phone was buzzing where he'd left it. "Emily," he called, eyes on the screen. "I'll be home late tomorrow. Meeting with suppliers." Misha, our salon's director, was an honest, straightforward man. If there really was a meeting, he would have told me. "Okay," I said. That lie was the final straw. In the morning, while Mark was in the shower, I got dressed and left the house. In my bag was the slip of paper with appointment number 37. The clinic greeted me with the smell of bleach and a heavy silence. I sat in line among other women, some young, some older, some alone, some with someone beside them. No one talked. Everyone just stared at their phones or at the floor. They called number 37 at 8:30. My legs felt like jelly as I followed the nurse down the hallway. She opened the door and said, "Come in, doctor. Carter will see you now." David was sitting at the desk in a white coat, his hair neatly combed, his gaze steady. He looked up from the medical file and froze when he saw me. "Emily," he said softly. I couldn't move. Out of all the doctors in this city, in all the clinics, it had to be him, the man who might be the father of my baby. "Have a seat," David said, gesturing to the chair in front of the desk. I sat down, clutching my purse like a lifeline. The room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall and the faint noise of traffic outside. "Are you sure about your decision?" he asked, flipping through my chart. "Yes," I answered, though my voice wavered. David set the chart aside and looked at me. In his eyes, there was no judgment, no surprise, only a deep sadness. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "That night in October when we met, I was burying my father. He died of cancer after months of suffering. We had the memorial at that club because he loved to dance, and the Imperial was his favorite place." I listened to him, not fully understanding where he was going with this. "After the memorial," David went on, "I got drunk for the first time in my life. I couldn't bear the thought that he was gone. The bouncers threw me out onto the street, and I thought I'd just stay there, in the dirt. But then you came along." He fell silent for a moment, looking out the window. "You saved me that night, not just from the cold, but from the despair. And now what?" I asked. "Now I'm supposed to kill the child who might be ours." The word "ours" hung in the air between us. We both knew there was a chance. "That's not your problem," I said quietly. "Things are complicated at home. I can't—" "You can," he cut in gently. "You're just scared." Tears welled up in my throat. He was right. I was terrified of being alone, of the judgment, of the responsibility. "My husband is cheating on me," I blurted out. "He's planning to leave me for someone else. I don't even know who the baby belongs to." "And so you decided to kill it?" David asked calmly. "Don't say that," I sobbed. "What else should I call it?" He stood up. "Emily, I won't try to change your mind. If this is truly what you want, I'll do it. But answer me honestly. Are you here because you don't want the baby, or because you're afraid of the difficulties?" I said nothing, wiping away my tears. "Think about it," David said quietly. "You have until tomorrow. If you're still sure, then come back and I'll do everything properly." I stood up and walked to the door, but he stopped me. "Emily, no matter what you decide, you're not alone. Remember that." I ran out of his office, and only when I reached the street did I realize I'd left the ultrasound referral on his desk. A small gray piece of paper with a blurry image of a tiny, bean-shaped life. That evening, I found it crumpled in the trash bin outside my building. Mark wasn't home. He was out meeting suppliers again. I smoothed the paper out and stared at the faint outline. My heart was racing. At 6 weeks, a baby's heart is already beating. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Mark, who was snoring softly, and gently touched my belly, trying to feel something. It was too early, but it felt like there was a flutter inside me, a whisper of life. By morning, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to have the abortion. Not because I had changed my mind about Mark. He didn't even come home until after midnight, smelling of someone else's perfume and lying about his meeting. I decided because I realized that if I killed this child out of fear, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Mark left for work like usual, kissing the top of my head and muttering something about love. I waited until he was gone, then packed 2 suitcases and called a cab. I got to the salon just as it opened. The girls were surprised to see me with luggage, but I told them I was going to visit my mother for a few days. I went into Misha's office and put my keys and documents on his desk. "Misha, I'm leaving the business," I said without any preamble. "My share goes to Mark. Make sure it's done properly." Misha stared at me like I was crazy. "Emily, have you lost your mind? What's going on with you two? Everything looked fine." "Nothing is fine," I said quietly. "And you know that. There was no meeting with suppliers last night." Misha's face turned red and he looked away. So he knew about the cheating, but had kept silent. Loyalty between men. "Emily, don't be hasty," he said gently. "Talk to Mark. Work it out." "We're done," I said simply. I stood up and took my suitcases. "Take care of the girls. They're good. They don't deserve to get caught up in our mess." I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment in an old building near the city center. High ceilings, big windows. The first few days I lived on edge, expecting Mark to start calling, demanding explanations. But he was silent. A week later he sent me a text. "Emily, let's talk. I understand you're tired. You need a break. Come home." I didn't reply. Another week passed, and he showed up at my door, standing there with a bouquet of roses and a guilty expression. "Can I come in?" he asked. "No," I said, not opening the door fully. "Emily, what is this? Some kind of childish game?" His voice took on an edge of irritation. "You're a grown woman. Why the drama?" "That's exactly why I left," I said. "All right," he sighed. "If this is about Katie." "Katie? So her name is Katie." "It meant nothing," he went on, but I interrupted him. "Mark," I said calmly, "I'm pregnant." He went silent. Slowly, he lowered the bouquet to his side. "How far along?" he asked quietly. 8 weeks. I watched him do the math in his head. 8 weeks. That's October. The company party. That night, he said slowly. "Is it mine?" he asked, his voice even quieter. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. Mark's face changed. It grew hard and angry. "What do you mean you don't know? Who else were you with, Emily?" "You," I said steadily, "and someone I met that night, when you were kissing Katie at the party." He was silent for several seconds, absorbing this. "So you did this to get back at me?" he said finally. "Congratulations. You succeeded." "This isn't revenge, Mark," I said. "It's consequences." "So what now?" he snarled, throwing the roses on the ground. "You're going to have a baby, and you don't even know whose it is." "I'll have a baby by whoever's there for us," I said. And I closed the door. Mark pounded on the door for a few more minutes before he finally left. I sank to the floor in the hallway and cried. Not out of self-pity, but out of relief. Everything was finally said. David found me a month later. He just knocked on my door one Saturday evening when I was reading a book about pregnancy. "How did you find my address?" I asked, letting him in. "Through the clinic's records," he said. "I'm sorry for intruding, but I was worried." He had brought a bag of groceries and a thermos of soup. "You don't have to do this," I said. "I know," he replied, taking off his coat, "but I want to." We had dinner in silence. Then he washed the dishes while I watched him move around my tiny kitchen, calm, confident, like he had been here 100 times before. "David," I said finally, "what if the baby isn't yours? What if it's Mark's?" He looked at me, his expression steady. "Then everything is complicated," he said, "but that doesn't mean it's hopeless." In the 4th month, Mark showed up again, this time with a lawyer. He was demanding a DNA test, threatening to go to court over the business division, yelling that he wouldn't pay to raise another man's child. I stood in the doorway of my apartment, shielding my growing belly, listening as the man I'd been with for 8 years turned into a stranger. "Do you even realize what you're doing?" he yelled. "You're tearing this family apart for some random guy." "You tore it apart, Mark," I said quietly. "By the way, does Katie know you're here?" The lawyer tugged on Mark's sleeve, clearly wanting to leave, but Mark tried one more time. "Emily, think about this. I don't care whose baby it is. Just come home. We can start over." "It's too late," I said, and closed the door. David was waiting on the stairwell a floor below. He came up when Mark and the lawyer left. "Were you here long?" I asked. "Long enough to step in if I needed to," he said. "You didn't need to." "I see that," he said, and then he pulled me into a hug. "Are you all right?" I nodded, burying my face in his shoulder. "Yes. Finally, yes." Our daughter was born in May, when the lilacs outside the hospital were in full bloom. David held my hand during the contractions and was the first to cradle the baby when the doctor showed her to me. "She's beautiful," he whispered, gazing at the red, scrunched-up little face. "Truly beautiful." We had chosen her name a week before she was born, sitting on a park bench, tossing around ideas. David liked traditional names. I wanted something modern. And then he said, "What if we just call her Lily?" And I realized that was exactly right. Mark came to the hospital on the 3rd day with an enormous bouquet and a box of baby clothes. He stood in the doorway of the maternity room, watching me holding Lily, and said nothing. "Can I see her?" he asked finally. I nodded. He came closer, gently pulling back the edge of the blanket to look at her tiny face. "Who does she look like?" he asked quietly. "Herself," I said, and it was true. Lily wasn't like me, or like David, or like Mark. She was her own person, just Lily. "Should we do a test?" Mark asked. "What for?" "To know for sure." I shook my head. "Mark, what difference does it make? You chose Katie. Live with her, be happy." He stood there for a moment longer, then kissed my forehead and left. I never saw him again. David came to pick us up from the hospital in his old Toyota. He brought us home, where a crib and a changing table were already set up in my little apartment. "When did you have time to do all this?" I asked in amazement. "While you were in the hospital," he smiled. "I had a key, remember?" I didn't even remember giving him the key. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was there, that Lily was sleeping peacefully in his arms, that the three of us were sitting on the couch watching the evening lights come on outside. 6 months later, David opened a private clinic in our neighborhood. It was small but modern, and he spent long hours there, yet always found time for us. I started an online cosmetics store, not a salon, just a delivery service, working from home while Lily napped. Little by little, it took off. Mark never stood in the way. We settled the business, split through lawyers without seeing each other again. David and I never called ourselves a couple. He rented an apartment nearby and came over every day, helping with Lily. 2 adults, caring for a child who needed both of us. "Isn't it strange?" I asked one night as we walked by the river with Lily in her stroller. "We don't even know whose daughter she is, yet we're raising her together." David stopped and looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully. "Does it matter to you?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "Not really. She's ours. That's all that matters." "You know what I've learned?" David said as we kept walking. "Family isn't about blood. It's about choice, choosing to be there every single day." Now Lily is almost 1.5 years old. She walks and talks, calling me Mama and David Papa. She has his deep brown eyes and my smile, but her personality is all her own. Yesterday, we sat on a park bench watching her play in the sandbox with other kids. David read a medical journal, and I answered emails from clients. Just an ordinary summer evening, an ordinary family. And for the first time I realized, if Mark hadn't betrayed me, if that night of desperation had never happened, I wouldn't have known this kind of love. The real kind. The kind that isn't about obligation, but about choosing each other again and again, every day.